Good morning. Mine is necessarily a very somber subject. I won't have time to go through the paper in its entirety, but I will try to let you know where I am. And Carlos, if we could have the world picture, please. I learned some new and shocking things in these last few months, and I feel compelled to share them. I didn't know the scope of this Holocaust, with over 1 million babies being murdered each year. We are rapidly approaching 60 million dead babies since abortion was legalized. That would mean over 1,500 before noon today. If you haven't been utterly appalled by the 11 undercover videos exposing Planned Parenthood's practice of selling infant body parts, please view these so that you know what is going on. It is nothing short of trafficking in human organs, the butchering of tiny human beings, and the sale of their remains. And here's the thing, 75% of those women having abortions call themselves Christian. As Randy Alcorn says, for years, the pro-choice position has had a hotline to our brains. By reading newspapers and magazines and watching TV, we have all earned the equivalent of a doctorate in pro-choice thinking. The abortion mentality has so steadily and pervasively metastasized in our society that it has contaminated and infiltrated our culture, reaching every social institution that touches our lives. Abortion is the most important issue of our generation, the defining issue. And just imagine how many people have been employed by the abortion industry in the 43 years that abortion has been legal. Many of those people self-identify as Christian. It's not about choice. It's about what that choice is. Pro-choice for one means death for the other. Let's look at the facts with both reason and emotion. We must not say, this is not our war. This is our war. And this chart, should we really be shocked by the sale of body parts? Or is this the inevitable outcome when a society loses its moral boundaries? The question before the court in the case of Roe v. Wade was whether the so-called tissue of pregnancy had any constitutional rights or protection to it. The outcome in the case was based on the persuasion of justices that since the Constitution grants its rights and protections to all natural-born citizens, that babies not yet born did not have those rights. 5 of the 7 Supreme Court justices felt for this argument that the unborn child has no rights, not even the right to protection, not even the right to continue living. What a dreadful lack of knowledge about human development they displayed, as all of the biology textbooks of the time could have helped them to see the error of their ways. They did precious little research or verification for their argument that a fetus was not the moral equivalent of a baby. A minority morality began to be imposed on this nation. What would have been repellent to previous generations became the norm, a scene in which the strong dehumanize and kill the weak. An amazing paradox is that the best column on pro-life ever been written is by pro-abortion attorney who devised, argued, and won the case of Roe. She had just graduated from law school at the top of her class. She'd had an illegal abortion. She wasn't married, and she was very ambitious. She was finding it hard to find employment. And she and friends had actually to search for someone to use in this case, as you can't bring a case without an actual plaintiff. They found Norma McCorvey, who played no active role whatsoever in the case. And I'm delighted to say that she is now pro-life and actively advocates for the reversal of Roe v. Wade. The defense consisted of attorneys Flowers and Floyd. As I read them, I believe that they both were of the opinion that Sarah Weddington never had a chance. This was her first case. They didn't seem to prepare or even feel the urgency to do so, and she did. She came to court anticipating the objections put to her, and she practiced her responses. She'd done a great deal of research and came thoroughly prepared, while the opposition seemed to think that being part of the Old Boys Network would work for them. They were at a total loss. Sarah Weddington was charging that the 1850s anti-abortion laws were unconstitutional. The state of Texas was defending them, or not. Justice Blackmun, who wrote the majority opinion, in later discussion, apparently said that basically those 7 justices would have given her anything she asked for. She was very impressive looking, and Justice Blackmun admitted that women were asking for this, so we just gave them what they wanted. Only 2 of the 7 justices dissented, but they still signed the majority report. Have you ever wondered what a successful abortion is? It is the intentional death of an innocent child. Otherwise, it's not successful. And if it were not alive, it wouldn't have to be killed. Have you ever wondered what the plan of Planned Parenthood is? Is it not the premeditated killing of an innocent child? Killing is not health care. And when you delete a child, you delete yourself as the parent to that child. Abortion is legal because babies can't vote. Again, Weddington argued that since the Texas law viewed the woman as the victim rather than a perpetrator, the fetus therefore cannot be the victim. Attorney J. Floyd had not done his homework. His lack of knowledge was damaging. He was asked whether there was any state that equated abortion with murder. He answered none. In fact, 18 states had prosecuted women for crimes of abortion. Whether the opposition was weak or lazy or simply inept, we don't know. But that repeated floundering helped to turn the tide for Weddington. A very important point was at stake. U.S. anti-abortion laws had been on the books since about 1850. It was important that the current justices understand what had gone before. Attorney Flowers, having no idea why the laws came into being, could only agree with Weddington that abortion had been a kind of common law of liberty, and that it was only for the protection of the mother that the laws were passed. Flowers was asked if the destruction of a person in the form of a fetus was legal. He agreed that it was, since he was unfamiliar with the history of abortion law. This was anything but due diligence, and it simply was not true. We've been made to think that abortion was not criminal in England and America before the 19th century, but a legal scholar and historian says this regardless of how many times these claims are repeated. However, they are not facts, they are myths. Could we have page 20, please? This is the author speaking about one of the justices.
Whether he was aware of it at this point or not, Blackmun's history and logic were seriously flawed. Destruction of a person in the form of a fetus was never legal in Texas, nor in any state prior to 1973. The specific question of personhood was not addressed in abortion laws.
The term personhood was started by pro-abortion advocates when they finally were forced to concede the fact advanced by the pro-life people that an unborn baby is indeed a human being. So they changed their tune, saying that, well, the fetus may be a human being, but it isn't a person. This is another logical fallacy called moving the goalpost. The entire Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision rested on this one word, personhood. These judges knew and admitted in their decision that unborn babies are living human beings. They denied that they are persons. And by the way, the ebook from which I quoted this is authored by Lynn Buzzard, who is here today for the first time. Delighted to have you. Right, let's drop down to the bottom of that page. And could I have clips 23, 25, and 27, please?
Reading the 1857 annual AMA report, we find this.
The first quote.
As a profession, we are unanimous in our condemnation of the crime of abortion. Mere resolutions to this effect and nothing more are therefore useless, evasive, and cruel. If to want of knowledge on a medical point, the slaughter of countless children now steadily perpetrated in our midst is to be attributed, it is our duty as physicians and as good and true men, both publicly and privately, and by every means in our power, to enlighten this ignorance. If we have ever been thought negligent of the sanctity of fetal life, the means of correcting the error are before us.
Book. St. Louis University sociology professor, Dr. William Brennan, pointed out the following.
They had such an impact on the state legislatures that James Moore, in his book Abortion on America, called this the physicians' crusade against abortion from 1850s until 1880s. They were very clear. They said that human life begins at conception. It doesn't begin at quickening, it doesn't begin at viability, it begins at conception. And they reiterated this several times in both 1859 and 1871. Thou shalt not kill, they talked about. The innocent and helpless unborn children. They kept identifying the unborn child as the victim of abortion and not the woman. They repeat that time and time again. It's just amazing. They call abortion, 1871, a murder, a foul, unprovoked murder, and its blood, like the blood of Abel, will cry from earth to heaven for vengeance. I've never read anything more direct and graphic and strong anti-abortion statements, even today, than what the AMA indicated in 1859, 1871. All you have to do is read through this account.
Christians have now arrived at the unanimous opinion that the fetus in utero is alive from the very moment of conception. To extinguish the first spark of life is a crime of the same nature both against our Maker and society as to destroy an infant, a child, or a man. By that higher-than-human law which, though scoffed at by many a tongue, is yet acknowledged by every conscience, the willful killing of a human being at any stage of its existence is murder.
The last word is murder. I forgot one part here. I'm just going to summarize the 14th Amendment. And then, when the 14th Amendment was written, the word human was a synonym for person. That's all we need to know, I think, about the 14th Amendment. And so I'm at the top of page 4. So the premise which Weddington promoted was false for a start. The AMA were very clear that life began at conception, and they identified the unborn child as the victim of abortion and not the woman. They referred to abortion as murder, even foul, unprovoked murder, comparing it to the blood of righteous Abel, crying out for vengeance. The doctors themselves campaigned, writing thousands of letters to their state legislatures saying that abortion was morally wrong. What caused this position's crusade against abortion? The development of microscopes, to the point that fertilization could be seen. And so with the knowledge that life began at conception, medical science moved out of the Dark Ages and into the Age of Enlightenment. How fascinating that in the 1850s they knew this, that life began at conception. The old adage that seeing is believing was responsible But then we regressed and we lost it under the pounding of the abortion lobby. Interestingly, it is now that ultrasounds are available to show prospective parents their babies. I'm told that 9 out of 10 mothers, when shown ultrasounds, will not choose abortion. But of course, mothers are not being shown ultrasound by Planned Parenthood. Ben Shapiro, a journalist, was challenged the other day by a girl who said, "It's my body and I can do what I like with it." And he answered this: actually, no, you cannot. We have laws in this country against taking drugs, against prostitution, against trespassing, even loitering. And if my left arm, which is part of my body, wants to flail out and smack somebody, society tells me that I cannot do that. So this is a very widely believed faith. A choice for one means no choice, no life for the other. How did this happen? Eclipse of reason. So how did this happen? Simple answer: we were lied to. How did this gargantuan monster enter our society? Dr. Bernard Nathanson: I am one of those who helped usher in this barbaric age. I worked hard to make abortion legal, affordable, and available on demand. I was one of the 3 founders of the National Rights Action League. I ran the largest abortion clinic in the United States, and as its director, I oversaw tens of thousands of abortions. I have performed thousands myself. How could this have happened? The edifice of abortion is built on a foundation of lies. Nathanson once not only told those lies, he helped to invent them. But he became converted to the pro-life cause, and while still as an atheist, he produced 2 documentary films: The Silent Scream, which energized the pro-life movement, and the second film, Eclipse of Reason, shows a 19-and-a-half-week-old baby being murdered. Nathanson's ultimate conclusion: abortion is an impermissible act of violence. The abortion lobby also gained much public support by arguing that tens of thousands of maternal deaths per year were due to criminal abortions that went wrong. Former abortionist, the same Dr. Bernard Nathanson, has subsequently stated that the 10,000 figure was essentially pulled out of thin air, since it sounded plausible and it made the desired point. According to Nathanson himself, he invented the lies, and then he told and sold the lies. As a young man, Nathanson arranged and funded his girlfriend's abortion. Much later, he referred to this as his introductory excursion into the satanic world of abortion. And I note that other authors have made this same connection between abortion and the evil one. In fact, they say anyone who can casually discuss tearing children to shreds while having lunch is a victim of the father of lies. Anyone who traffics in abortion loses a vital and beautiful spark of humanity. Nathanson and his friends lied relentlessly and spectacularly about the number of women who died each year from illegal abortions. Their pitch to voters, to you and me, lawmakers, judges, was that women were going to seek abortions in roughly equal numbers, whether it was lawful or not. The only effect of outlawing it, they claimed, is to limit pregnant women to unqualified and often uncaring practitioners, back alley butchers. These were self-confessed lies, but many, perhaps even most people, still believe them. We fed the public a line of deceit, dishonesty, a fabrication of statistics and figures. We succeeded because the time was right and the news media cooperated, apparently to the tune of 95% of the news media. We sensationalized the efforts of illegal abortions and fabricated polls which indicated that 85% of the public favored unrestricted abortion, when we knew it was only 5%. We unashamedly lied, and yet statements were quoted as though they had been written in law. I've attached Dr. Nathanson's Confessions of an Ex-Abortionist at the end of the paper. Abortion was packaged and sold to the public as a remedy for a terrible problem. It was presented as the only logical choice, a kind of neutral, and I would ask when is neutral ever meant killing, a kind of neutral position, our natural and reasonable feelings of compassion for someone in a very terrifying situation were exploited. After all, it was only tissue, and the overwhelming sentiments were for the poor girl or young woman whose life it would ruin. Add to that the myth of huge numbers being forced into back alleys, and you have a public assenting to killing multiple millions of its citizens. And so, all of the arguments that a mother might, that might appeal to a mother thinking of abortion, if you consider financial hardship, inconvenience, stress, those arguments can be just as persuasively applied to a 2-year-old or even a teenager. So why don't we have the right to kill them? I'm going to skip down now to the last or next to the last paragraph. Let's look at the logic of this very commonly expressed opinion. I'm personally against abortion, but I'm still pro-choice. We shouldn't try to impose our views on others. First of all, to be pro-choice is to be pro-abortion. I'm going off the paper now. Many people say, I'm not pro-abortion, but I am pro-choice. But how would you respond to someone who said, I'm not pro-robbery, I'm just pro-choice about robbery? In exactly the same way, to be pro-choice about abortion is to be pro-abortion. Some imagine that being personally opposed to abortion while believing others have the right to choose it is some kind of compromise between the pro-abortion and pro-life position. It isn't. To the baby who dies, it makes no difference whether those who refuse to protect her were pro-abortion or merely pro-choice about abortion. Being personally against abortion but favoring another's right to abortion is self-contradictory. It's exactly like saying, I'm personally against child abuse, but I defend my neighbor's right to abuse his child if that is his choice. And what about the logic of killing an unwanted child? What would be most unfair to an unwanted child is to kill it. The problem of unwantedness is a good argument for wanting children, but a poor argument for exterminating them, eliminating them. How enormously twisted our thinking has become on these points. We have allowed the other side to frame the debate. To forbid birth is only quicker murder. He is a man who is to be a man. The fruit is always present in the seed. At the same time, the abortion lobby did a thorough job of making all who did not comply look like ignorant religious zealots, bigots, whose desire it was to remove freedom from others. I'll just skip over this next section. It's called the SLED test. SLED as in toboggan. And it is essentially saying that size is terribly important, that as it grows and as it develops, it will become a human. The fallacy here is that nothing becomes human which isn't human, to be candid. Nothing non-human becomes human by getting bigger and older. Clip, please, 47 and 92. Let me just preface this by saying I very much want you to hear Sarah Weddington as she admits that if the unborn were a person, killing it would be the equivalent of killing a born child. And remember, it was on this basis that this sort of perverted thinking, it's on this basis that our law turns. So you will hear one of the justices, Justice Stewart, asking Sarah Weddington a question.
Well, if it were established that an unborn fetus is a person within the protection of the 14th Amendment, you would have almost an impossible case here.
I would have a very
Yet Weddington denies humanity to a human fetus in her book.
We stated further that the unborn fetus was not legally a human being, and that therefore killing a fetus was not murder or any other form of homicide. Homicide in Texas applied only to one who had been born. A fetus was not considered by the law equal to a human being. Sarah Weddington, A Question of Choice.
Biblically speaking, the case is almost too easy. Our mandate is to help the least of these, and in that way we do service to Jesus. How abhorrent is violence done to the helpless, and evil is praised throughout the land. In Luke 1:43, we actually have the Lord Jesus in the womb. It is from Scripture that we take the premise of the sanctity of life as a divine law. All human beings, even the handicapped and defenseless, are seen as individuals of value since they are made in the image of God. Abortion is hostility against God's creation. There are many, many scriptures in the footnotes. I would ask you to look at those later. And I would just add Ezekiel 35, verse 6, where we're told to hate evil and to hate bloodshed. What about the right to continue living? This is an amazing phrase. It speaks actually more sharply than the right to life. It is just this that is being denied a baby the right to go on living. Randy Alcorn attended a pro-life rally and was holding a poster of a picture of a baby in the womb. And he was approached by a student who said, "We know you photoshopped that. We know that's just tissue and cells. We know that's not real." She was programmed, she was conditioned not to believe reality. You can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. As long as people believe in absurdities, they will continue to commit atrocities. These next 2 points are key, as they come up all the time, and they're almost universally believed. While he was the Surgeon General, Dr. C. Everett Koop stated that in 36 years as a pediatric surgeon, he personally was not aware of a single situation in which a preborn child's life had to be taken in order to save the mother's life. To him, this extremely common pro-choice argument was nothing more than a smokescreen. Taken together, the 3 main pro-choice arguments used to justify abortion, the safety of the mother, rape and incest, and fetal abnormalities, amount to less than 5% of all abortions performed in the United States each year. And yet, they cause good people to assent to killing. Consider, please, the logic of killing a child who is the product of a rape or incest. Does it not seem that the guilty party should be punished and not the innocent? And since when would abortion bring healing or comfort to a rape victim? And in the case of rape, look at how we've dealt with this. We already have one damaged individual. So what do we often advise? For the other individual, kill it. So then we have one damaged and one dead. And what about already born people who came to be because of rape? Are their lives less valuable? There are absolutely marvelous true stories of people who survived abortion and who were the result of rape and are wonderful and valuable people. America needs no words from me to see how your decision in Roe v. Wade has deformed a great nation. Another leading abortionist, Dr. Anthony Levatino, converted from being an abortionist doctor to pro-life. He says there is not a chance in hell that I would ever do another one. He reckons abortion to be one of the worst human rights violations in history. Texas turnout at lights. Clip 83B, please, Carlos. 83B, please. And this is on your paper. It's on page 8 toward the bottom in quoting from.
And this new individual has never existed before and will never exist again. This has never been disputed. This is the big lie that the opposition have because they don't want to be said that they're killing human beings.
And she goes on to say, so it's true that it's intellectual dishonesty. Ressler summarizes that there is no confusion among biologists as to when life begins, only among philosophers and politicians. In 1855, the Supreme Court decided that African slaves were not persons with the rights of citizens. In 1973, the Supreme Court decided that the unborn were not persons with the rights of citizens. That was the first one was known as the Dred Scott decision. And on the next page, I'll drop down to the paragraph just before the bold type. But ghastly as these decisions were, the fact that the Dred Scott decision was reversed has to give us hope. And why, I ask you, why is the idea of infanticide revolting and not the idea of killing in the womb? The idea of killing a 3-month-old child is absolutely revolting. Why is it less horrific to kill a 3-month-old in the womb? Every movement of oppression and exploitation has labeled itself, whether directly or indirectly, pro-choice. Either life is always and in all circumstances sacred or intrinsically of no account. It is inconceivable that it should be in some cases the one and in some cases the other. I think Dr. Gerster's use of the word asinine is appropriate here as she asks what magic happens at the moment of birth to turn what was not a person into a person. She says that's an asinine argument because if it's a person, if it's a human being in the light of day, it's a human being in the darkness of the womb 30 minutes before. And dropping down to the bottom of page 9, Randy Alcorn will not use pro-choice language because he says there's no such thing, that it's evasive and fraudulent. As he puts it, it's not about the choice, it's about what that choice is. The whole concept of choice is hailed as the highest good. But think about it. A pregnant woman does not have unlimited choices. She only has 2, life or death. Please, 93 and 94.
Impunity. Dr. Brennan.
The terminology changes. If the child is wanted, the child is a human being. If the child is not wanted, the child is a fetus, protoplasm, what have you. Now, again, the same thing happened in the Third Reich. Why were they killed? Because they were unwanted. And what did they call them? Subhumans, waste products, what have you. And the same principle holds today. The terminology is twisted to justify and cover up the harsh realities of what happens to the victims. The euphemisms are medicalized. Here's a prime example. Joseph Fletcher, our prominent bioethicist who's no longer with us, said, pregnancy, when unwanted, is a disease, a venereal disease. Of course, this is what the Nazis said about the Jews. They referred to them as syphilis, venereal diseases. Okay? And what we were doing is, when we kill Jews, we are performing a public health service. Again, medical treatment, the medicalization of killing. If you can put it within the context of medicine, it gets all kinds of
Legitimacy is the last word there. Blacks didn't choose slavery. Jews didn't choose the ovens. Women don't choose rape. And babies don't choose abortion. These people are all victims. And I want to know, what about the victims' rights? These people were denied the right to choose. Abortion was sold as the gospel of choice. Choice has always been such a good thing. Who would not want a choice? Very few questioned what that choice was. The philosophy live and let live, or more accurately, live and let die prevail. Even those who thought they were against abortion bought the necessary evil paradigm. After all, we wouldn't want another child to grow up in poverty, would we? And haven't we swallowed that line to this very day? But Webster points out a 19th century analogy in which a slave owner admits that there is something wrong, even evil, about slavery, but he still maintains that it's a necessary evil. This has, in fact, caused us to tolerate a culture of death. The flawed logic of a woman's right to choose creates an excuse that one can hide behind if one does not consider it too deeply. This slogan created a new abortion-on-demand orthodoxy. But what if the mother-to-be were to ask herself this: does the Constitution give me the right to say that my child must die? We, of course, as Christians, answer to a higher power. Women must have a choice. Some of our politicians even shriek this in their speeches. But what about the choice for the tiny little boys and the tiny little girls? You can have your own opinions, but you cannot have your own facts. The choice for one necessitates the loss of life for the other. How does having a choice compare with dismemberment, with the tearing of babies' limbs? I'm just dropping down now. I'll summarize that next paragraph, but it's interesting just to remember what the doctors sign on to with the Hippocratic Oath. I will maintain the utmost respect for human life from the time of its conception, even under threat. I will not use my medical skill contrary to the laws of humanity. Okay, over the page. And just a point about location in that second paragraph. It's all about location. Inside the womb is dangerous. Outside, the law's on your side. The appalling logic of this is seen in looking at the situation of a scuba diver. Underwater, killing a scuba diver underwater is as immoral as killing that same individual when he's breathing on land. Dr. Jefferson believes that abortion will be reversed on an unborn child protection case. And of course, the states do have a compelling interest in protecting the lives of its children. As of March of 2016, Hillary Clinton has admitted that she does not think that unborn babies, have any legal rights before birth, and I believe she is still defending partial birth abortion. She also claims that there is a right to privacy in the Constitution. There's no such thing. We need to do, I skipped a bit. Hillary's litmus test for a Supreme Court justice is that they must uphold unlimited abortion access. She claims that it is a right guaranteed under the Constitution. We need to do everything possible to educate as many people as possible about her extremist abortion position. And partial birth abortion is beyond unbearable. I wouldn't be able to describe that to you. Please, 119 and 120.
Randy Alcorn.
People talk about, don't say I'm pro-abortion, just say I'm pro-choice. Well, in every other area, you can't say you're pro-choice. We have to talk about what choice is on the table. What choice are we discussing? Because if we're talking about whether you like Chinese food or Mexican food, everybody's pro-choice about that. What kind of car you drive, where you live, what kind of clothes you wear, things like that. We're pro-choice about those things. But we're not pro-choice about child abuse. We're not pro-choice about rape, kidnapping, theft. I mean, everything we've got a law against means we're not pro-choice about that thing.
Dr. William Brennan.
The most common euphemism invoked today to conceal the horrors of killing inside the womb is the word choice, and its derivatives pro-choice, right to choose. Now, the Nazi doctors constructed a similar code word to cover up their horrendous atrocities, the term selection. The whole reason that Nazi Germany came to be is that some took it upon themselves to choose, to select who would live and who would die. The language of choice has become so predominant in the pro-abortion world that even the word abortion has been expunged from the pro-abortion lexicon. The right to choose, the right to select, constitute deplorable slogans. Beneath these democratic-sounding phrases is an especially hideous form of oppression. The right to choose, the right to select, to kill other human beings. Just as the Nazi doctors had the right to select who would expire in gas chambers, today's doctors, in conjunction with others, have the right to choose, to select who will perish in abortion clinics or...
The last word, hospitals. The crux of the matter, it is not a war on choice. It is a revulsion against killing. Every single evil thing that has ever been done by one individual to another is a choice. It is not a war on choice, it is being honest with what that choice is. The choice to end life, which in all other circumstances we call murder, or to allow life to continue. The sin of silence. To ignore evil is to become an accomplice to it. When we say nothing at all, we are still saying something, or it has been said. I used to think if I didn't say anything, I wasn't saying anything. Now I know better. When we don't speak, our silence speaks for us. The question should be, do you think people should have the right to choose to kill children? We too have known the evil from its start. In this great nation where for 43 long years the innocent unborn have been slaughtered, we have grown accustomed to the killing and have gone on with our business, with our lives, and with our ministries, while the little ones have perished every day, about 3,700. This is what we've come to in America. The Supreme Court of our land, and I know it's now illegal, had questioned at that time the horror of partial birth abortion, this most barbaric and grotesque killing of a child in the midst of its birth. And yet, even in the face of this abomination, the churches of America, the pastors of America, are silent. Where is the cry of outrage? Where's the indignation of the people of God? We too have known the evil from the start. Body parts being trafficked stand in mute testimony to our failure and to our guilt, which is to say that churches have had very little, if any, influence on the behavior of their members. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Clip 336, please.
Dr. Brennan.
This is a perversion of the first order because it exploits the language of rights as a pretext for taking away the most fundamental right to life itself. It is an arrogant, elitist assumption of the awesome power to destroy those who cannot defend themselves, an extreme manifestation of the strong victimizing the helpless. It is also a blatant sham because the victims, the ones most drastically affected, are the very ones who do not have the right to select or choose. It is death at someone else's selection or choice. This is not freedom, but the worst kind of tyranny.
There is a 1-minute testimony. I won't take the time to go over it, but it's very interesting. Please have a look at it later. It is a poverty to decide that a child must die so that you may live as you wish. Could anything be clearer? This unspeakable homicide, this scourge on the conscience of the nation, this Holocaust of the unborn surely is the darkest chapter in our history. Abortion has led us into complete moral subjectivism in which we are prone to justify as ethical whatever it is we want to do. Abortion should be viewed as unthinkable, immoral, a violation of our every natural sentiment. destroying our own progeny is godless, a morally repugnant extermination of innocence. May God work with us in both fact and emotion to cause the appropriate response. The unborn are human beings just like you and me, and that is why killing them is wrong. A counselor who has spoken to countless thousands of women has said that he has never heard anyone say that they are sorry to have given birth, but he has heard thousands upon thousands of heart-wrenching stories, pitiful regrets by women who have had abortions. Morality cannot be legislated, but behavior can be regulated. Judicial decrees may not change the heart, but they can restrain the heartless. Do not be fooled by the jargon. No, it's not a question of choice. It's a question of killing. We have to face this reality. In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. How totally incredible it is that although we have everything on our side, we have science, we have biology, we have medicine and psychology, we have theology, we have technology and visual, and we have legal history, as well as passionate testimony by doctors and mothers who've had abortions. And yet, we have been railroaded into this. Evil has been victorious to the tune of nearly 60 million lives. And now for the good news. You deserve some good news. We must oppose this culture of death. And it is a blessed thing to do so. To stand and be hated and to return love and prayers is a holy activity. I'm referring now to being at a pro-life rally or perhaps even an anti-abortion protest. All of those, here's the good news, all of those dedicated to abortion are possible allies, and they could be won for the cause of life. And more good news. 50% of the American public are apparently on the fence on this issue. And that means they can be spoken to, reasoned with, and persuaded. And it means that we might have opportunities to save lives. Mere waiting and looking on is not Christian behavior. Christians are called to compassion and action. Please engage. Please be challenged and challenge others. Again, this is our war. We must take up the cross on behalf of the innocent and defenseless. It's past time for boots on the ground. There was a 750,000 strong pro-life rally recently in Lima, Peru. Why is it so quiet here? Have the courage, as Justice Scalia said, have the courage to have your wisdom regarded as stupidity. Be fools for Christ, and have the courage to suffer the contempt of the sophisticated world. Abortion is always wrong because it is always killing. Knowing these things has changed me. Please don't let this information die in this room. The only value that it has is outside this room. Perhaps this will resonate with you as it has with me. I can no longer accept the things I cannot change. I can try to change the things I cannot accept.
Any questions, you can come to me, and we got a mic here if you have a question. If not, there's
a comment online.
Oh, yep. What's the comment?
J3 in Australia, who's listening in online, says it's a very important work Barbara does. We need to be clear with the world about where we stand on abortion.
Comments too, if you have any comments.
Do I have time to sneak in one thing? Anthony wanted me.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't put it in my...
Go ahead.
This is Randy Alcorn. A radio talk show host told me she was offended that some people called her pro-abortion instead of pro-choice. I asked her on the air, why don't you want to be called pro-abortion? Is there something wrong with abortion? She responded, Abortion is tough. It's not like anybody really wants one. I said, I don't get it. What makes it tough? Why wouldn't someone want an abortion? Frustrated, she said in an impassioned voice. Well, you know, it's a tough thing to kill your baby. The second she said it, she caught herself, but it was too late. In an unguarded moment, she revealed what she knew and what everybody else knows, if they will only admit it. Abortion is difficult for exactly the same reason it's wrong, because it's killing a child.
Thank you.
Well, the charts and information like this don't appear here. Is there a way that we can get that?
I put some information at the back table, and I put the books that I've used back there. Just come to, I'll provide you anything you need, please.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Paul Aber from Ohio. I just felt like in a discussion on abortion like this that maybe you did it because of time constraints, but it has to be mentioned Margaret Sanger and her eugenics to get rid of certain races and people she thought was desirable at the root of abortion. It's really horrid about what she was really trying to do with abortion. I'm sure you studied that. How she's trying to get rid of the Negroes or black people because of abortion. I just think that has to be mentioned because it's such a crucial part of the origins of abortion.
It is, it's fascinating, but there is so much disagreement that I decided, first because of time, but secondly, there is so much disagreement even on her actual quotations, because I read that she is both pro and anti-abortion, and I can't figure it out. But yes, it's a fascinating story.
Sean Finnegan from
New York.
Brooklyn.
Upstate, man. Upstate, where the real people are. Thank you for that. I want to check out that footnote you had from Randy Alcorn about the biblical case, because I can't help but notice how lacking the Bible is on this subject. I mean, there just doesn't seem to be much, probably because it wasn't widely practiced in Israel, and so you don't have much talking about it. But early Christians lived in an abortion society, the Roman Empire, where abortions were very common, and they spoke against it very early and very frequently. And so I just wanted to share two little quotes, one from the Didache and one from the Epistle of Barnabas. Didache 2:2 says, "Thou shalt not commit murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not commit pederasty, thou shalt not commit fornication." We're all in agreement with that. "Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not practice magic, thou shalt not practice witchcraft, thou shalt not murder a child by abortion, nor kill that which is begotten." So this is the Didache, which is super early. Between, it could be as early as the 1st century, before even the rest of the New Testament was finished, or at the latest, maybe like 130, early 2nd century. And it's not a controversy, it's just listed just among other sins. The Epistle of Barnabas, very similar, says in 19:5, "Thou shalt not be of a doubtful mind as to whether a thing shall be or not. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain. Thou shalt love thy neighbor more than thine own soul. Thou shalt not slay a child by procuring abortion, nor again shalt thou destroy it after it is born." And then it goes on from there. But it seems like in the ancient Roman Empire, there were two practices. One was aborting, and Tertullian talks about how they did it with different poisons and other things I won't mention here. But the other practice was killing a child, an unwanted child, by exposure, just basically putting the baby out on the garbage heap and letting the child die. Now, we recognize that as immoral, but the day before, or I'm not sure what the law is, but sometime before, then it's okay. So I think that's a real strong point, that there is a Christian legacy against abortion from the earliest times of Christianity, just after the New Testament. Even if the New Testament doesn't seem to address it. The only thing I'm sorry I'm commenting so long, but the only thing I could really say, I mean, there's that one debated verse in Deuteronomy, but the clear scripture for me is love your neighbor as yourself. And what is closer to a mother than her own child as far as the neighbor goes? So it's just some thoughts.
Thank you. Yes, I wondered, frankly, what is the difference between the pagans throwing their children on the fires in sacrifice to Moloch and that, what we're doing? I think it's very similar.
Thank you.
If I could add a comment just from here. Yeah, early church grew by rescuing abandoned babies.
Good point.
That was actually one of the things the church did was so people had to come to church with women. Because it was usually women that were abandoned.
Thank you.
From Michigan. Barbara, I really enjoyed your speech. It was very informative. I have a scripture in mind in Psalms 139 where it talks about the Most High. He says, it's according to David. When David was in the womb, it says, your eyes even saw as me an embryo, and all his parts were written in your book regarding the days when they were formed, showing that God is interested in the womb.
Yep. One more. Sorry about this. We're supposed to use that one.
Hi, my name is Paul, and one of the things I do is send out movies that are relative to different things on scripture or prophecy. If you want to borrow a movie, one I rarely recommend on this is by Jonathan Kahn, who is a Jewish writer, and he has a movie called The Harbinger, and he states that there are 9 things that happened on 9/11 that God is trying to warn us of. And he makes a point in particular that since Roe v. Wade and all this came about with abortion and the murder, that in Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 10, he describes it, this thing that happened, and was from Isaiah. It happened in ancient Israel, and it's happening today in Assyria. The descendants from Assyria were the ones that came and tried to warn us by attacking us, and that was kind of God's warning. And it's an interesting movie called The Harbinger, if anybody wants to see that. He refers to the reason was Moloch. This is what really angered God so much, is that they were actually sacrificing their children. They stopped worshiping on the Sabbath, and then they started worshiping idols. And one of those big idols was Moloch, and one of the main things was the worship of sacrificial children to this god of Moloch. And that's why he sent the Assyrians to overcome them. In Isaiah chapter 10, verse 5 and 6, it says, I'm going to come against Assyria, but I'm going to use Assyria to come against Israel if they don't change their ways. And so it's a really interesting movie. I just want to recommend that.
Okay, we'll have a 15-minute break and be back here for Greg Dimmitt, Pastor